Shapes and Sounds acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we're recording and connecting with you from, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present.
Hello, Oscar.
Hello.
So for everyone who's been following on from season 1, we kind of had a really interesting discussion about men's mental health and what that kind of looks like. We spoke about how societal pressures sort of play a role in that, but we never actually spoke specifically about what that looks like on a personal level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, season 1, we talked about cultural expectations and media representation of Asian men. And we also talked on some of the different strategies that we could approach, like journaling. But from personal experience, I think I mentioned before, but there's not that many men that I know that actually journal, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to a more broader theme, I guess, in at least my perspective, which is like that a lot of men don't actually access mental health services.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot for us to speak about in this episode. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to see where this goes.
Welcome to the Asian Mental Health Podcast, brought to you by Shapes and Sounds.
So to explore what men's mental health sort of looks like on a personal level, today we have Jagesh here with us. So Jagesh Panchal is the founder of Shakti Mental Health, a social enterprise that advocates and supports mental well-being in the South Asian and multicultural community. He is a youth and community development professional currently working for the city of Melbourne as a youth project coordinator. He loves advocacy, cooking, and all things basketball. Welcome, Jagesh.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Welcome. In today's episode, we're going to be listening to how Jagesh lives and how he takes care of his mental health and some of his strategies as well. But that being said, we also can remind ourselves that we can use those ideas that we might get from this discussion and try and implement that into our own lives, maybe find some new strategies and give them a go as well. And our mission here at Shapes and Sounds is to destigmatize mental health within the Asian community, especially for men, where it's like we acknowledge that there are unique boundaries and stigmas surrounding Asian men, especially with help-seeking behaviors. So yeah, Jagesh, to pivot the conversation, what's the origin of your passion for men's mental health?
Yeah, so I really got into the mental health conversation and trying to advocate for mental health more when I got more into university. So growing up, I had a lot of lived experience of going through anxiety, depression, but really didn't understand what that meant. And it was very hard in the South Asian and Gujarati community to talk about mental health because, my parents didn't necessarily talk about it or not understand it much. And there wasn't many around me who really discussed it until I got into university and saw other multicultural students and South Asian students there discussing similar issues. So thinking about all right, well, we have a lot of issues in our community around mental health, stigma. There should be a space in Australia for first, second generation of South Asians here where they can find a safe space and really advocate for mental health and get the conversation going. So I started Shakti back in 2018. So since then we've been growing more and more, which has been really amazing. And really, yeah, like what you said, so our role is to destigmatize mental health conversations. And simply put, what I explain to people is I don't want the next generation of young South Asians going through what I experienced. So if they have that proactive support, that means hopefully it won't get as bad down the track and you can put strategies in place.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what's the kind of actual work that you do at Shakti Mental Health?
Yeah, for sure. So what we started with, it was called Shakti Perspectives. So what we do is when we started Shakti, I was reaching out to different friends or people who have discussed mental health in their personal lives. So what Shakti Perspectives does is invite those South Asians onto our platform, and where they discuss in a written or video piece their challenges, their mental health journey, what supported them, what kind of experiences they've had. And what we found is that when other South Asians read that write-up or that Shakti Perspectives from someone else who's South Asian, it builds a sense of belonging. So you can see that, there's other South Asians here who've been through anxiety or have had issues or challenges with family or have had to leave home or have had to study something else. And you can relate to that person as well. And then you can see that, there's others out here who have experienced similar issues. Maybe it's time I either share or like look for my own mental health support and start my own journey as well. So it really just builds that sense of like belonging.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something about seeing other people taking initiative with their own mental health that really does make it more normal for other people. Like if you see that other people are doing it, then it feels more okay to do it yourself, and like, oh, even just, maybe sparks the idea, should I be doing something about my own mental health, you know? And yeah, I think that's something that I'd like to ask you, like what are some of the experiences that you've seen through your work of how perspectives have changed about mental health with some people that you've worked with?
Yeah. So I think what I've seen is there's been, for myself, like included a big shift from keeping it very private to really now putting it out in the open. So what I'm seeing with a lot of like multicultural or South Asian friends is that they're quite open about like their mental health journeys, looking for support. A lot of the conversations recently has been around people jumping between psychologists because the one they started with has either been like really bad or not like culturally inclusive, or they just didn't know how to search when they look for their first psychologist. And similar experience when I went to like therapy for the first time, it was through employee assistance program, EAP.
Can you explain that one?
Yeah. So employee assistance program. So some workplaces have a connection to like a psychologist provider where it's like confidential, and you ring this like hotline or number, and then they put you in touch with a mental health professional, and you can get like counseling support. But the first experience I had of that like really sucked. So I sat down in this room with this like old like lady, and I felt like I was just forced to like just say stuff. And I was like, this is like what I've been going through with family. These are some of my struggles with work, being really stressed or not having a good sleep schedule. And there was times where she would just stare at me, and we would just be in the room and it'd be silent. And I was there like, so do I just keep talking?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is weird. Yeah. Is this what it's supposed to be like? Yeah. And there was a couple of helpful tips. Like she really supported me with like a good sleep schedule. But besides that, it was really hard to talk about like those cultural nuances of like what being South Asian meant. So that was like 5-6 years ago. And then I went again a second time to deal with like some like personal issues. And this was like 2 years ago. And that time I really took the time to find a therapist, see someone who was South Asian as well. And within the first session, like the therapist, she was South Asian. And I was like explaining some stuff. And then like the one sentence she says was, I completely understand what you mean. And that sentence alone, I was like, oh my God, this is so much better. So personally, I think for me, like it's that journey of finding psychologists has been like really up and down. And I think a lot of either South Asian or multicultural people can relate to it, because it's really hard to find someone who you can really open up to and find someone who works for you as well.
Yeah.
What was that like for you then to like build your own community for like South Asian like mental health, and like, or maybe more specifically like your work with like South Asian men?
So what we found through our platform Shakti is when we did Shakti Perspectives, I realized or saw that a lot of the people who wanted to speak up were either not from a male gender, or they were female or other genders. And I think I put that down to there's a lot of stigma within the South Asian community of men speaking up about mental health. So when I was going through our Instagram feed, I was like noticing like, oh, there's so many females here, which is really amazing. And there was like one male, maybe every like 10, 20 people, like, we need to do something about this. What can we do to get a conversation going? So I did a bit of a shout out on Facebook and was like, hey, like I run Shakti. We're hoping to do a men's mental health, like South Asian discussion. So we did our first discussion, it was like 2-3 years ago in Carlton. And we like recorded the whole thing, which was really cool. And from that, we were reached out to from another like funding organization who was like, you're doing men's mental health discussions. That's really cool. Would you consider being funded to do a series of them? We're like, wow, awesome. That's sweet. Yeah. So it's like free money. Yay. Which is really cool. So that funding helped us to set up like a year's worth of monthly South Asian men's mental health discussions. And through that, we saw that the community was like, this is really cool. I wish I had this when I was younger. Like, where are you doing it? What's involved? So through that, we were able to get more men on our platform do Shakti Perspectives, and then we were able to get men coming on a monthly basis to discuss different mental health topics. Yeah.
as a sort of predominantly East Asian team here at Shapes and Sounds, like I think it's important for us to like preface and also acknowledge that I guess we only speak from that East Asian perspective and like not even, you know, like we only speak from the three of us.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and in fact, even from the three of us, it's probably just me and Asami talking about Japanese stuff the whole time. Sorry, Marcus.
Yeah,
what about Cantonese?
I'll just speak to myself, but yeah, obviously there's so much diversity like within East Asian cultures or South Asian cultures or even like within each of those categories. So yeah, I just like wanted to like ask like what were your thoughts on that sort of diversity and like if you had any sort of like insight into that nuance.
Yeah, I think so. Being like South Asian or East Asian, or you know, just being Asian in general, there's so many like cultural nuances from that specifically. So it's like, so my like for example is Gujarati Indian, but even with being Gujarati, there's like different aspects of being Gujarati. Like, you know, what part are you from? Or, like I'm constantly telling people always like, "Where's your dad's village?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's over here." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." I'm like people also from there. But like I feel like mine's interesting because my mum was born in Uganda, and then her mum was also born in Uganda. So like back when in like 1900s or so, you had a lot of Indian Gujarati population go to Uganda for work. So that's how my mum ended up there. And then in the 1970s, the government at the time kicked out all the Gujarati Ugandans because there was a dictator there, Idi Amin, who wanted like Pan-Africanism, so just like black Africans running Uganda. And all the Gujaratis there had British passports, so they were taken in by the UK government. So it was like really interesting to learn all this. I remember like it was cool. Like the BBC did this like documentary on my uncle and mum and her family traveling from Uganda to Scotland. And there's this like cool video of like my grandmother like learning English. And there's this like lady when they arrived in Scotland, this like British lady is like, "This is haggis. What do you think of it?" And, my grandma's like, "Oh." Very polite.
Yeah.
But it was funny. Like I remember I did this like interview with my grandmother one day, and I was like, you know, when you moved to Scotland, you know, what was it like? Was it really harsh? You know, were you treated badly? I thought she was going to be like, it was trash. It was so bad. And she was like, no, the government, they gave us money, they gave us housing, they fed us. It was, you know, it was cold, but it was actually all right. So bringing back to the main point of like nuance of culture. There's like being Gujarati for me is one thing, but then there's being East African Gujarati, which is really cool, which I'm learning more about. And then when you're South Asian, it's like, yes, you're like Punjabi, but what part are you from? Or you're Tamil, but I'm from Tamil Nadu, or I'm from Karnataka or another part. So there's all these little nuances, and we were talking before like about food. So it's like, you know, what food do you eat? Like what culture do you follow? What's your traditions? So a lot of those things, when we're talking about like mental health, are really important because if you're like a professional trying to work with someone from that culture, you also need to understand, you know, what they're bringing with them.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a core memory or a core emotional tie to a meal that you have known from your culture?
Yeah. So it's currently, so if you're like Gujarati or Hindu, it's Navratri coming up, which is like a tradition festival that we do that runs for 9 days. Right. So it signifies like the 9 days it took the goddess Kali to like vanquish him by dancing on him. So she danced on him for 9 days and that's how she won. So and so our like festival goes for 9 days and there's a lot of like dancing and there's like some religious elements for it. But during that time we're like vegetarian. So a vegetarian dish that I've made with like mum, I think is batata nushak, which is like potato curry. And like roti or rotli. So like I learned how to like mum taught me how to like make rotis at home, which is really cool. It's like flour and water basically, and then you knead it together and you make a dough. And then we have what's called, like in Gujarati, it's called a velin or a rolling pin. And then you have like a flat board and you've got this piece of like dough that you roll out, and it's like flatbread really. And then you cook it on like a stove. And my mum's really good at doing it because she like, I don't know, she's unaware of heat. It like, she'll just put it on there and like, so it blows up like a balloon. And she's like, that's when you know it's ready. So she'll like touch it and it'll go flat again. but like she'll touch the stove directly, whereas like I'm like with a pan trying not to hurt myself, and she's like, no, it's ready, put the next one. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's just something you learn, I think. Yeah.
We've touched on a lot of diversity here, especially within just the South Asian context, but also what are some of the key themes that you see for a more general like Asian mental health perspective? Like what's something that you see as like themes from, all these different Asian countries? What's something that you've seen from men's mental health?
Yeah, what I've seen from like the men's mental health in like Asian, South Asian perspective is the I think like the varying types of challenges that a lot of South Asian men are struggling with. And a lot of it is like we touched on before, it's a lot of that deeper like either depression, it's shame in our community, it's like feeling really negatively about yourself, it's not speaking up, and it's keeping a lot within yourself. It's like I've talked to other friends who have kept like a lot within them, and they've said, like coming to the circles is a good starting point for me. And they've said in the circles, like, I don't speak much, but it's good to see other South Asian men there who are also speaking. And that gives me the confidence, maybe the next discussion I'll speak up a little more. So what we're seeing, or what I'm seeing, is like that timidness of not reaching out or waiting until it's too late to reach out if you're a South Asian man, and not having conversations. And some of the things like I've like spoken about within our men's groups is that a lot of men, they don't, South Asian men, they don't necessarily like tap their mate on the shoulder and be like, hey, can I talk to you about like depression or something? A lot of our conversations are around places of comfortability. So it's around like cricket, it's around sports, it's around like barbecues. It's around just like going out with your mates, and those where those conversations come up, and they come up in a natural way there. But we need like, a comfortable environment around us in order to share, especially for men sometimes.
Yeah. It's not like it self-instigates. You kind of have to have some sort of activity or passive something going on to be able to open up like that. I see what you mean.
So, Jagesh, we've kind of talked about your journey into men's mental health and like what that sort of looks like, but we really want to know what you do. And I'm sure like the listeners want to know as well. Like, what do you do on a like daily or like weekly basis? Like, how do you take care of yourself? And just before we dive into that, like, I think it's important that we contextualize this sort of conversation as well, just to know where you're sort of sitting with your mental health as well, just so people can sort of locate and like know how much they can sort of relate to what you're saying as well. So just on a scale of like 1 to 10, 1 being very bad mental health and 10 being excellent, where would you say you sit right now?
At the moment, I think I'm like maybe like a 6 or 7.
Okay,
which is it's
pretty
not
solid.
bad.
Pretty solid.
It's solid. It's like a good medium point. But I say that because I feel like at the moment, like I like being someone who's like a busy person or like doing a lot. And sometimes like that's like it's bad because like I'll double book sometimes. And like I'll get really frantic. But I'm saying like a 6 or 7 because there's a lot going on right now. That's really, really cool in a sense. So we're doing like a lot of events with like Shakti, for example, which is really good. And then I work like my other role, I work for City of Melbourne, and I do that 3 days a week. So at the moment it's balancing like putting time aside for Shakti and then starting or like doing this role with City of Melbourne as youth project coordinator. And there's a lot like in that role that I'm trying to figure out, or like, where do we put our efforts and time to, and this is like, I'm going to jump somewhere again, but like, because we have some youth workers, youth people in the room, like with young people, there's a lot of issues at the moment with like housing and homelessness, mental health, trying to find employability. So we're really, at my other role, trying to figure out, what's our role as project coordinators in that aspect. Like, how do we support community? How do we support young people? How do we get their voice into the City of Melbourne? And then with like Shakti, it's like a lot of times I'll like finish the role in the city, and then because I live in the southeast, it takes like an hour and a bit to get home. And then I'll open up my like personal laptop and start stuff like Shakti. And this is like 7, 8 at night, and I won't finish till like 1 a.m. or something sometimes. So right now my sleep is like really up and down. It's really bad. There's days where I get, I'll sleep at like 2, wake up at like 7, and it's like 5 hours, and I wake up and be like, I'm going to sleep on the
Oh,
train.
no.
This sucks. Yeah. So, but in that sense, like I like being like really busy, like having something to look forward to, having something to do. So like I don't like having nothing or having doing nothing at all.
Yeah, no.
But going back to like that self-care aspect, what I do to really like take care of myself is like a little thing like playing basketball is really big for me. So I'll try and like do that quite a bit. But really relaxing just by like binging or watching something on Netflix. At the moment, like me and my partner, we're really into Love is Blind UK.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just funny to like, because I'm someone who likes shouting at the TV and like commenting on stuff. And when I'm with other friends, they're like, can you shut up? I'm trying to watch this. But with my partner, she's really cool because she shouts and comments on the TV as well. So I'm like, yes, I can do it. Yes, it's good. So it's really good to like not have someone be like, can you like, not and being like, yeah, they do suck, or like, oh, he's so bad for her. So like doing a lot of those is really so that's a lot of my like self-care stuff that I do. What else? I really love just like listening to different music. There's a lot of different like South Asian artists who are doing some really good like DJ sets or like mashing up a lot of like different like classical or cultural South Asian songs, but they're making them, really like garage or like DJ vibes. And it's cool to see more South Asian creatives have a space together and come out and do like music shows. Or coming out in Melbourne and doing like a lot of stuff. Like there's a huge scene in the UK of just like South Asian like DJs doing their thing. Where I feel like in Melbourne and that's like lacking a lot. So really finding like those artists is really cool self-care that I'm doing for myself as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. That sounds so fun. Like I feel like, it's such an interesting mix where you see like, I mean, it's really the place for it really. Like DJing is like a medium.
Yeah.
Great place for cultural mixing.
Yeah.
And, bringing back some aspects of cultural referencing as well. I think that's really interesting. You talked about there's a lot of pressure with keeping up with your projects, both at your many workplaces and keeping on top of everything. So you touched on some of those things. Would you say that's a daily or a weekly kind of thing?
That's like, I say it's a weekly thing. Yeah.
Do you do anything like, do you have like a sort of a ritual, like a daily ritual kind of thing, or is it more long-term than that?
What I've started a bit more is like, more daily words of affirmation and stuff like I'll say to myself, and it's not like when I leave home, it'll just be like random times if I'm on the train or like before I go to sleep. So like daily words of affirmation are like quite helpful at the moment. What I've got are like little cards and they have like, they've got a small like sentence on there and like each, like the paragraph or sentence like is about like different aspects of like life, I guess. One of them is like, it could be like around boundary setting, or one of them is like, one of them is like, today you should feel good about yourself. You've come a long way. Like you're doing a lot of different things. Don't feel bad about where you're going or what you've been through. So they're just little cards like that. And some people are like, nah, that's whack. Why would you do that? Other people are like, oh, that's really cool. Because what I find as well is that we don't give ourselves enough of a break, or we don't like pat ourselves on the back, for example, or like tell ourselves like we're doing really well. And we hear it from other people, but how often do we sit back and be like, you know what, like I did a lot today, or you know what, I didn't do anything, and that's also okay. And you kind of like need to hear that for yourself sometimes as well. It's something new. I'm still trying to figure out what's working best for me with that. But it's something new I've like really started. And then there's times where I can get like, or really frantic and like overthink a lot of things. And one of the things I learned in like my like last time I went to therapy is to compartmentalize everything. So I'm someone who like, for example, like if I was on like a date or something and like someone's running late, or what used to go through my head is like, oh my God, they've ghosted me, or like they're not going to come. What am I going to do now? But instead, like what I learned when I did therapy is compartmentalize everything, take it step by step. So putting things into perspective. So for example, like, okay, like you're in a new place for like this date, for example, that person isn't from that area as well. So maybe they're like trying to figure out how best to get there, or they're trying to figure out, or maybe they're the same, they're trying to figure like what the date's going to go like. So, and that's really helped just me for my self-care to put things into perspective. Instead of being like, well, this day sucks. It's more like, okay, take it step by step. Or if I'm running late to something, I used to be like, oh my God, I'm going to walk into this room, everyone's going to look at me, I'm going to freak out. But instead, I've put it into perspective, be like, all right, you're going to be late. What you can do is, message that person. Oh, I'm going to be like 15 minutes late. It's a big event. No one's going to notice you. You can just like walk in. It'll be fine. And learning that really helped. And it supported me not to like overthink or become too frantic with things, especially if I'm going somewhere where I don't know anyone, or it's like a new environment where I know like one or two people. So that's been really helpful.
Cool.
So obviously you balance a lot of like work stuff and then like obviously like your personal life as well. So then how would you know like you sort of hit your limit with like going like way, like everything's happening way too fast and like everything's like way too stressful?
Yeah. I don't.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's so fair. That's
so we
fair.
do like Shakti's big, and then City of Melbourne, and then I work another like casual role for another youth organization. It's like this youth foyer model, so it's like 24-hour supported youth accom.
Okay.
So youth development worker there, and then I do some like extras like TV work on the side, which is also fun. So that's the thing I went back to. Like I like being like a busy person, and sometimes like that's my own downfall as well, because I'll like double book things sometimes where like I'll commit to one thing, but then like someone's like, oh, remember we got this today. I'm like, oh, I didn't remember. But what I found out recently as well is I'm neurodivergent. So that's something I've really learned about in the last like year or so. So I remember like, and this is like when I did like ADHD assessment, for example, like I went back and talked about a lot of like childhood stuff around like, things I used to do, or like forgetting stuff. And like, I just put it to like, well, it's just being me like being forgetful. But the more I've like find out about like neurodivergency, what are the traits, I've got a lot of like traits from that I've tried to get strategies around. So the strategies have been really helpful. So I'm learning like more about what like neurodivergency is. And what I'm finding as well, there's been a lot more like either young people or South Asians who have also experienced or have traits of neurodivergency. So I know like Anushka, who you've had on the pod, speaks a lot about it, and she's got a lot of really good tips around it too. So it's really cool to see there's others out there who have these like traits, and they're trying to strategize themselves or like how to be the best selves. Yeah.
I'm sure it must be so affirming to like know that about yourself and like, sort of finally have an answer as well. Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, you touched on the strategies, but like, do you think that sort of changed your overall sort of outlook to mental health as well?
Yeah, I think it's changed my outlook in a sense that I know that a lot of it's like, it's really just like, it's a journey. And I know there's going to be days where like, it's going to be either like I'm not feeling like the best about myself, and there's going to be days where I'm feeling like really high. So what with like the neurodivergency, for example, is not trying not to be like too hard on myself, for example. Like I'm someone who can be either like really forgetful or like misplaces things. Like the common one is like, I saw this video and it's like this person who's like making tea. So they go to the fridge, they get the milk, and then they make the tea. And then they lose their teacup, so they go get another cup and they make their tea. And they do that like 5 times. And there's 5 cups of like tea in front of them. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. It's not just me. So a lot of the times as well, I try to, I either like make fun of myself, or I'll find memes that relate to a certain like, seeing something that's happened. I'm like, oh, there's a meme about it already. Cool. So a lot of that stuff is like, I find really helpful. Yeah.
Would you say, all right, a little bit like of a zoom out here, like that feeds into a more like overarching ethos or philosophy you have towards your mental health? Like, do you have one, I guess, do you have some sort of structure to how you think about it, or?
I think, I feel like I don't have like a structured way of thinking about like my own personal mental health, but I know when I need to either like talk to someone or talk to people, or I know when I need to find like either professional support, or like, okay, is it time like, do I need to start thinking about going back to therapy again, for example, or who do I talk to in this example? So I feel like with my mental health, I now know good strategies to put in place so it doesn't get to that like really dark place where I'm just not saying anything to anyone. It's really isolating, or like I'm waiting for someone to like ask me something, where that really doesn't happen. So I'm really more proactive in telling people like what's going on, like when I need to, and having my own like strategies in place. Yeah.
And I'm sure it must have been such a journey sort of getting to that point as well.
Yeah.
So
took a while. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for any other men who might be listening as well? Like that journey?
I think 100%. What I can say, the first thing is to at least like communicate what's going on. That's a really big thing. So it doesn't mean like you have to communicate to everyone, but I think it's important to communicate to like the people who are close around you. So if you've got like a good group of mates, or if you've like got a partner or someone who can really listen to like what's happening. And in that sense, like do it, like I said before, for like men or South Asian men, do it in a comfortable setting. So if you're watching like sports together, or you're like at a game, or like you're just having a drink with people, like try and bring it up there. And at the same time, I know like there's always, or there could be men who are like, well, I don't have mates or someone around me. Like, what do I do? And I think that's where, it's harder, but try and go out and see like supports available. So like, is there a discussion space I can go to? Are there someone with similar interests who I can meet or start to talk to as well? Or even like, there's a lot of people who are like, I'd rather just like sit on the computer or something, but are there spaces online where I can talk to people about it? So I think it's that sense, like with mental health and like with like men, for example, or it's just starting that first point of like, who can I communicate with to like start that journey. Yeah.
All right. I have a random question in here. This is going to get a bit imaginative, but if time and resources were not an issue, what would you like to see put in place to support men's mental health? Like if you could do anything through Shakti or through whatever
like a government policy or like
I think one of the things I would love to see is having more culturally inclusive psychologists and mental health professionals available. And like having no wait times at all. I think like one of the issues is, and on that as well, what it's been really cool is that we've got like, similar to like Shapes and Sounds have their mental health practitioner list. It's cool. And like, especially South Asian men have come up to me from our circles and been like, hey, I found a psychologist from your Shakti Mental Health list. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. It's really cool to hear, because it's like, oh, we're actually supporting people. People are using our list. They're finding mental health professionals. So I would love to see like, in a big picture world, like no wait lists, free accessible mental health care for everyone. And what else? I think what I found with mental health as well is that a lot of it is, what supports us a lot is like place-based situations. So for example, like I think having spaces where people can just go meet and like feel better about themselves or feel good about themselves. So I think in a big picture world, if we can have more spaces where people can just go and be like, I'm feeling really down, but I need to talk to people. Oh, there's this event on, let me go to this. So more events coming up that are really culturally inclusive. I think that would be really cool, more to see as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Hopefully soon enough, these will manifest themselves into the world.
Yeah. So you touched on so many themes, and like they were so important. So thank you for being here. We talked about sort of having those comfortable settings for like men to have these conversations, like maybe like starting with where they feel comfortable, like even if it's just like at like a sports game or something.
Yeah.
We touched on, what else did we touch on? Like acknowledging like the sort of diversity and like South Asian and East Asian cultures, how that might affect like men. Anything else?
We touched on your strategies about how to manage your stress, especially considering you seem to be juggling a lot of things at once.
Yep, 100%. But just for the listeners out there, just as a reminder, whatever works for Jagesh might not work for you. We just wanted to sort of highlight all these different perspectives and ideas that like might help you think about what might work for you. Yeah, and we do like to share a little reflective question as well. So what should we say?
I think we should share both of them. We have two prepared. Cool. Here we go. So to the listeners, from what you heard today, what's one of What's one way that you can support the men in your life to care for their mental health? Also, what's something new from this episode that you could include into your own mental health care routine?
We'd love to know your thoughts on these reflective prompts as well. And yeah, for everyone who's listening as well, please follow and download this episode on your favorite streaming platform. And you can find us on Instagram at Just Shapes and Sounds. So yeah, thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Jagesh, for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it so much.
And we'll see you all in the next episode.
This is a production from Shapes and Sounds. It's hosted by Asami Koike, Marcus Lai, and Oscar Abe, and produced by Yo Chung. We're proudly supported by the Victorian Department of Health's Diverse Communities program. All thoughts and ideas you hear are independently ours and our guests.